In a quiet town, tucked away from the rush of modern life, there lived an elderly woman named Eleanor. At 92 years old, Eleanor's life was woven with memories that spanned nearly a century. She spent her days in the modest house she had called home for decades, where every creaking floorboard and well-worn chair held stories of the past. Her family and friends described her as a living treasure, a keeper of wisdom and stories from another time. Despite her age, Eleanor's mind was sharp, her laugh infectious, and her stories vivid enough to transport listeners back to an era when life was simpler yet filled with trials that built her strength. Eleanor's story begins in a small farming village, where she grew up as one of 5 children. Her childhood was spent working in fields, tending to animals, and learning life's essential lessons from her mother and father. When she was a young girl, the world was plunged into turmoil, and Eleanor, barely old enough to understand it all, watched as her brothers went off to war. She learned early the value of resilience, of pulling together, and of finding joy in the small moments despite hardship. Even today, Eleanor recalls those times with a quiet dignity, speaking of them as a part of herself, an era that, though challenging, gave her strength. In her 20s, Eleanor married John, a quiet and kind-hearted man who adored her from the moment they met. Together, they built a life rooted in love, family, and hard work. She tells of days spent tending to their family business and nights spent under the stars, dreaming of a future that stretched before them. The years passed, and Eleanor became a mother, then a grandmother, and eventually a great-grandmother. She shared her wisdom freely, instilling in each generation a sense of responsibility, kindness, and gratitude. The family listened in awe as she recounted stories of navigating life's twists and turns, from the joys of motherhood to the grief of losing her beloved John. Her voice carries the weight of those experiences, yet her eyes sparkle with a zest for life that defies her age. Today, Eleanor's home is filled with photographs, keepsakes, and mementos of a life well lived. She spends her days in the company of these memories, content with the simple routines that bring her joy: a cup of tea by the window, tending to her garden, or sharing stories with a neighbor who stops by for a chat. Each day, Eleanor reflects on the changes she's witnessed over the years, marveling at the progress of the world and the way her small, quiet life has touched the lives of so many. As she sits by her window, Eleanor often thinks about what she'd like to pass on to the world. Her advice is simple but profound: to cherish every moment, to live with kindness, and to find beauty in the small things. She smiles softly as she shares these words with her grandchildren, knowing that her legacy is one of love, resilience, and wisdom, an invisible thread that will continue to guide her family for generations to come. Let's learn some words from the story. Turmoil. Meaning: a state of great confusion, disorder, or uncertainty. Example: the country was in turmoil after the sudden change in government. In the story, when Eleanor was a young girl, the world was thrown into turmoil due to the war, causing confusion and instability in her life. Instilling. Meaning: gradually but firmly establishing an idea, attitude, or feeling in a person's mind. Example: The teacher was dedicated to instilling a love of learning in her students. In the story, Eleanor instilled values like responsibility and kindness in her children, meaning she taught them these qualities gradually and with care. Mementos, meaning objects kept as reminders or souvenirs of a person or event. Example: she kept mementos from her travels, like postcards and small trinkets, to remember her adventures. In the story, Eleanor's home is filled with mementos, or keepsakes, from her life, each reminding her of special memories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.